Hello and welcome to the Creative Wealth Community Podcast. My name is Zachary Weaver and I have Matt McMullen here with me. He's a financial representative with Northwestern Mutual. And I met Matt at a Rotaract meeting in Jacksonville. And I really loved the way that Matt talked about working with people as a financial representative, how he I don't know. I loved his approach. I loved the way that he made it easy for people. I loved how he talked about, something he really enjoyed was seeing things click into place for people when they realized that they could achieve their goals. And so I wanted to talk to him more on this podcast because I thought he would have great insight for the creative wealth community on a number of topics, and I wanted to get to know Matt a little bit more. So welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Really excited.
Awesome. So some of the things that we talk about in the creative wealth community, one thing is we focus a lot on what we enjoy easily. And so I just wanted to ask you a few personal questions like that. And what do you enjoy easily?
Yeah, well, I love helping people. I love serving people. That's part of the reason I got into this career. Like you said, we met at a Rotaract meeting. I'm a coach, a baseball coach at the high school I used to play at. So I love serving, love giving back. That comes really easily to me. It's been a big thing in my family. I love music, all kinds of music. I play guitar. So I'm really passionate about music too, and sports, athletics, baseball. Been a baseball player since I was like 5 years old. Just wrapped up my college career not too long ago. So those are all the things that I really enjoy in my life.
Oh, that's beautiful, and beautiful that you have such a well-rounded range is what that sounds like to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So another question that we ask is, do you have a happy level of income in your mind? So an amount of money where you would be happy, satisfied, and feel taken care of if you have that much coming in.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, being a young single guy, I don't have too much on that expense side, not too many financial responsibilities, I guess you could say. So for me, really the biggest thing I'd like to be able to do with my income is travel. So, somewhere to me in the 70 to 80, 90 range, 1,000 a year would be plenty, way more than I needed just to survive, but that would allow me to do the traveling. But I'd say, honestly, for me, the money isn't the biggest thing so much as building this business. Takes too much time to be able to go and travel right now, but that'll come. That's something I'm excited to be able to do.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And that kind of makes sense for me. That falls in right into that kind of the average happy level of income from the studies they've done.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that you have a sense of where that would be. And then obviously, this is maybe even more an even more personal question, but are you receiving that happy level of income, now in your life, or is that something you're working towards?
Yeah, I'm not far from it. I'm working towards it right now. But I would say I'm not super far from it. I'm just continuing to build right now in the business, and it's something that just gets a little bit better, every month, every quarter. So we're building there, not too far away, but we're close.
That's amazing. That good for you. That's
Thanks.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
So have you noticed as you get closer there, have you noticed your life becoming feeling more the way that you want it to feel, or maybe have you noticed your life kind of coming into the fullness that you imagine as you get closer there?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we kind of discussed a little bit before we started. I recently got to do some little trips over the weekends, and that was stuff that I got to do by myself. And Like I said, the time component's the biggest thing for me right now. So only able to get small ones in on the weekends, but being able to do that is, a lot for me and really good for, my life and what I want to do with it. So as I'm starting to build towards that, I'm seeing those things where what I want to do are starting to become more regular parts of my life instead of just a dream or something I'm building towards.
Okay. Okay. Amazing. And I'm switching to just one more question now. What are your gifts? What are your talents and passions? What do you feel like you really want to share with the world? And of course, you covered a little bit of this already, but if you want to go even deeper with it.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, the reason why I really got in this career is because I'm not only passionate about serving others, but my background is in finance. And part of the reason I took this job was because when even I was back at school, is my friends would always, none of them had any sort of finance background. And they always ended up coming to me just for general advice. And obviously couldn't give anything professional back then, but was able to teach them certain financial concepts and get them kind of understand what's going on. And it's actually during the pandemic when things got crazy and the market dipped and everything else, where I'd kind of gotten my friends to a point where they felt comfortable investing in the market and being able to hear from them like, yeah, no, I did some things kind of like you told me, and I made some money off it. It was great. And it wasn't my professional advice that made them money because it wasn't professional and I didn't tell them what stocks or anything like that. But to see them get comfortable with the concept of investing and being comfortable putting some money into the market from me giving them some general advice was a great feeling for me. And they were conversations that I really enjoyed having. And I think they're conversations that I'm good at having. And so I think that's one talent that really plays into this career for me, is the fact that I really enjoy talking about it. And I think I'm good at talking about it. So I think that's probably one of these tasks that I hadn't discussed yet so far.
Oh, really? That's really amazing. I love that. And would you tell us a little bit more about what it's like being a financial representative
Yeah,
with Northwestern Mutual?
of course. So, like we talked about my job, what I do and what we do here is called holistic financial planning. So that just means that really our job is to sit down with people, find out what their goals and dreams are. So, we have tools, right? And those tools may be appropriate for some people and may not for others. And so there's no point in trying to take a cookie cutter approach to any one person or any one thing. So my job is to get to know people, get to know their goals, get to know their dreams, and then find the appropriate tools, connect them with the appropriate tools to reach the goals that they want to reach. So, in a typical day, what that would take is meeting with people either I haven't met before, and that's the kind of talk we're having is, hey, we're getting to know each other. What's important to you? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And learning about them. Or if we've had that meeting, we've put together a plan, and hey, I'm ready to present this plan. We're having an exciting conversation about, hey, look at this. This is where you can go. This is the plan you can follow. Here are the tools we're going to need to get there. So there's meetings like that. You call people to set meetings. I don't do like any cold calls or anything like that. I prefer to grow my business through introductions, through friends and other clients. I think it's more comfortable for me, and I think it's more comfortable for them when they know, like, okay, yeah, I know so-and-so, so it makes sense, for me to talk to you, right? So that's how I prefer to grow my business, and that's mostly the people that I'm talking to. And yeah, just day to day, it's long in the beginning. It's kind of like, when you're building it, it's like any other business, right? Where you're putting in hours. There's some flexibility and freedom, but it also means you're putting in a lot more hours than maybe you would at a salary type job. But it comes with all the benefits too of being a business owner.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. And so since it's not a salary type job, do you make commission, or is there, how does that part work?
Yeah. So it's different depending on, the type of tools that we go with, right? So, we do different things in the investment space, the insurance space, other types of planning. And, depending on the way we get paid on those is different, but ultimately it is a commission-based job. But, for me, that's the kind of thing where it builds up. The way it's set is to build up over time, where you're not trying to create a level of income just by selling as much as you can, so much as creating a good practice. And if you create a good practice, the income will come.
Yeah. From what I'm hearing, I'm guessing that a lot of the tools, there's a recurring commission with them, so that you have to have huge volume each month. You're building
exactly to reward you for creating lifelong relationships, because that's the goal. Our firm prides itself on keeping its clients lifetime at a very high rate. And so that's something that they want to incentivize us to do, is do right by the client, create a great relationship. Excuse me. And on the other end of that, you'll be rewarded for doing that.
That's really cool. I like that model, and I like, thank you for going into the details on that.
Of course,
yeah. And so what do you enjoy? You've already talked some about this, but what do you really enjoy about being a financial representative? Like, even just like breaking it down to like, what's your favorite, what's the favorite part of your day, or the favorite step in the process?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, we talked about this a little bit, and you mentioned in my introduction just briefly, but my favorite part of the whole process is presenting the plan, right? And showing, I've talked to people who thought maybe their goals weren't achievable, maybe they'd never be able to afford retirement. And when you sit down and you make the plan and you show it to the client, you say, hey, look, if we follow these steps, we're going to get you to where you need to be. When they didn't think that was possible before, and seeing that kind of click for them, and almost a sense of relief and also excitement at the same time, is super rewarding for me. And so that's my favorite, is getting to do those kinds of meetings with people. But the other aspects I enjoy, personally, it's great to, like I said, it's basically running your own business. And so that does mean it's a, commitment, a huge time commitment, but it also means there's flexibility there. And long-term in the career, it's the kind of flexibility that will allow me to do the things I would like to do personally. One, like we talked about, travel and other things that will come up along with life. But on the flip side of that, to me, this career also fits in, like I briefly mentioned earlier, where I feel like for me, my life, I want to spend helping and serving others. And so instead of having to use a job just to take care of myself and then help others on the side, I get to help others as a job, and then also use the flexibility and income I get from that to help others outside of work too. So it slats kind of right into, my life's vision and mission as well, which is just an awesome thing to be able to do.
Amazing. I love that you have all of that in your vision. It's all fitting together for you. That feels really good. And I, just for fun, where is there a place you're excited to travel to next, or that you imagine traveling to?
I've got two that are really on my board. I got I've been to Costa Rica a couple of times before, but I would love to go to Costa Rica in the rainforest, and just like no electronics, like 2 weeks, just enjoy life, just get away, from everything. I think that would be just a super fun experience. And then another is, I've always kind of wanted to make my way around the Mediterranean a little bit, Spain, Italy, Greece, a few different places. So those are kind of two big ones in my head that I'm working towards one day.
Amazing. Oh, we talk a lot, and we may have talked about this at the Rotaract meeting, but a lot of us in the creative wealth community really want to go to Costa Rica. Some of us have been, and so yeah, maybe we will all meet up there sometime.
There we go. Yeah, it's a great place. I love it there.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. I'm excited to see it. So now also I have some questions from one of our members. And what do you think? So what do you think about the possibility of the economy crashing?
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting question, and obviously, a very common one, right? If you turn on any sort of financial news or read any sort of financial newspapers or websites, whatever, wherever you get it from, you're probably going to hear somebody talking about, oh, the economy is going to crash, or there's a bubble, or no, this market's great, it's going to go crazy. And the one thing that I would say about that is, I don't necessarily want to predict about whether the market will crash or not, simply because nobody knows. Those guys on the news, that they don't know either. The only thing anyone can do is give it their best guess. And for what we do in our planning, it's almost irrelevant to try and predict that, especially long term, right? If we're talking in terms of decades, it's something irrelevant for us because we can't guess what a market's going to do in 40 years, right? We know that about 80% of the time the market's doing well. About 20% of the time it's in a recession, right? So we know that over a long period of time, we're going to have about 20% of that time is going to be down in a recession, and about 80% of it's going to be up. So the idea really, to me, for most people is not to worry about whether the market's going to crash right now, and more about having a solid plan that accounts for not only when things go right, because they do go right 80% of the time, right? But that 20% when it's going wrong, that's where mistakes get made. And that is where people end up finding themselves in trouble, right? So the best thing to do is just to have some sort of plan in place to keep from making mistakes in that 20%, right? If you're younger, right, and you're just investing for the next few decades, maybe saving up for retirement, whatever you're trying to do long term, I would say it shouldn't really be too much of a concern whether or not it's going to crash right now, because long term, you'll make gains. Right? As long as we don't make the mistake of we put in money now, maybe say next year the economy pulls back, 10%. If we get scared and we pull all our money out, we just lost all of that, right? And so that's the tough part. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Psychology of Wealth, which for anybody out there listening, phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, I would read it. And one of the great things about that book is it doesn't try and analyze, oh, this is how so-and-so got rich, this is how you can do it too. It doesn't try and say, these are all cold, logical ways you make money. It's about the fact that humans in investing, right, it's a very emotional thing. There's plenty of logical reasons you should do, X, Y, or Z, but humans are very emotional, and we'll never be able to take that out of investing, right? Because as long as we're human, there'll always be some emotion in these decisions. And so because of how we feel negative emotions, and we feel them so much more strongly than we do positive emotions, when you open your account and you're looking at, okay, I've gone up 2% this month. That feels great, but you put your phone away, you probably don't think about it much, right? But if you pull it up and you see that it's down 5% this week, you put your phone away, you're still thinking about it, right? It's still in your head. So that's why this question is so common, and you see it so much on the news, is it's such a big worry. Nobody wants to lose money on their investment. But the best thing to do is not to try and time anything, not to try and get out at the right time. The best thing you can do is just have a strategic plan in place to make sure that when things do go wrong, you're managing yourself and your money well, so that you're not making any mistakes, and that if you're in it for the long term, you're going to be okay, so long as you're not pulling your money out at bad times because it feels bad. And so that's one of the things that we end up doing for our clients a lot of the time that they enjoy, is that when things are down, they're not one button click away from just selling it all. Instead, you've got someone on the other side of a phone or email saying, hey, look, I understand this feels really bad right now, but we've planned for this. You've planned for this. You've set yourself up. We don't need to panic, right? And if you do well enough for yourself, if you really plan very well, you might even be in a position to invest more when the market's down, rather than worry about pulling money out. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is I would reframe the thinking from trying to time, oh, things are crazy, so the market's going to crash, to do I have a plan in place for when it does crash? Because it will eventually, but you'll never be able to time it exactly.
Thank you for that. And when you say a plan in place, what would an example of a plan be?
Sure. So the best, I guess there's a few topics to cover. So for us, when we talk about our planning, right, and our philosophy, the way we see it is there's really three buckets to your investments, right? So you've got a segment that we like to call the home run segment, right? Which is, this is the very risky stuff, but it's the stuff that if it works out, you're getting a big return on it, right? So these could be individual stocks that you've put a lot into. It could be real estate investment. It could be a lot of different things, but it's something that carries a decent amount of risk to it, but also a high amount of return. And so that's one bucket. The second bucket is your aggressive bucket. This is maybe more investing in a mutual fund, investing in an ETF, something that still has some risk to it, and some solid return, but not quite as much risk or return as that home run bucket. And the third, we have the safe bucket, right? And that's money where we don't want it to go backwards. We only want it to go forwards, but because it's safe, it's going to have the least amount of return, right? And so the important part and what is strategic about the planning is putting your money in those different buckets in a way that makes sense for you and what you're trying to accomplish and where you are in life, because you're going to change that over time, right? If you're in your 20s, right, you probably don't want or need a ton of money in that safe bucket, because more than likely your goals are more long-term. And so we want to invest it a little more aggressively so we can get that higher return over a long time horizon. But if you're 65 and you're looking at retirement, you're probably not going to want a ton of super risky investments, right? If you don't have something safe that you know you can rely on when that's your only source of income at this point. So the biggest thing is making sure that you are in those buckets in a way that makes sense for you and is comfortable for you. Like I said, investing is a very emotional thing too, right? If you're someone that hey, the high return sounds great, but honestly, I don't have the stomach for it. Just put me in maybe some aggressive, more safe. If you're someone that's like, yeah, I love to gamble on the weekends, put me in home run, like I'll do a little bit of safe, but put me in the home run. It's all about how you feel, how you handle risk, how you deal with it, and what your goals are, and knowing where the money is and when you're going to need it, which is something we call time diversification, which just means if a goal is 2 years from now, we might need to put that money in a different spot than if it's 20 years from now. And so having a plan for those different things of diversifying across your risk, right, with your home run, your aggressive, and your safe, and then also diversifying for time. So making sure that we've got money in places where it's appropriate to pull from at the appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you for, I really love talking with you. I really love listening to everything you're saying. I appreciate your thoroughness. So
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Matt. We have another, so this kind of feeds into the same question. Where is the safest place to invest money in these wild times?
Yeah. So again, yeah, like you said, it's almost in the same vein because it's a very common sense question, right? If you think things are crazy, you probably are going to want to put something somewhere safe, and that makes sense. But again, I almost encourage a reframing of the thinking to safe makes sense because we fear loss. But when does that loss matter to us? If we're young, again, it makes sense to go a little bit riskier if we don't need that money right away. If it's money you need next year for a house payment, then yeah, we want to be safe. But if it's money you need 30, 40 years from now in retirement, we don't have to worry too much about safety right now. And so there are a lot of different places if you really are looking into safe money. There are plenty of places you can get safe money, right? Whether that's bonds, insurance, money markets. There's plenty of ways to get safe money. But again, what I would encourage is, does that safe money make the most sense for what you're trying to accomplish? Because it might, but it also might not. And so that's why, again, it's important to have that strategic plan in place to know that even if we have some sort of, just stomach churning drop here in the stock market, if you've planned well for yourself, you might have that safe bucket. Okay, yeah, I planned for this to be able to take from the safe bucket. This other stuff, I don't like looking at it. It's down right now, but in 2 years, it'll look really good. And I'll be glad that I didn't pull from it, right? So I would encourage a reframing of thinking from I've got to invest the safest possible to if you are someone that wants to invest conservatively, that's fine, but make sure that that is what you want to do and that that aligns with your goals and it's going to allow you to accomplish those goals.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah. I was just found myself curious. Do you ever encourage your clients to just not look at those long-term home run investments for a while? Like just don't look at it until
Yeah.
the time that you've set.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's like, hey, if it's making you feel bad, like don't take a look at it too much. If this isn't money we're going to need right now, I mean, it's going to suck to look at, but does it matter to look at it right now when this money we're not going to be really pulling from for maybe another 20 years? No, it's just making you feel bad. So yeah, sometimes it's like, hey, maybe don't take a look at it, because it's not money that we need right now. As long as we know we're safe right now, we're good right now. It's not something that we need to waste any headspace on. So yeah, sometimes that's something we encourage, just because it's, as much as it is managing their money, it's also helping them manage through the bad feelings of when a market's down. And how do we navigate that so that we're not making any mistakes because emotionally we just don't feel very good and we just want our money. We want to be done with it, right? So that's part of what we do too, is help walking clients through that process so that they feel comfortable and they feel safe and secure so that they don't make those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I loved what you said earlier, the holistic approach. I forgot the exact phrase.
No, and you nailed it. And so that's part of what we do that I think is a little bit different, is just, a lot of things will plan for what goes right? Hey, you invest in this fund or you invest with us. Okay, you might get 7% a year on average, and we'll take that out to retirement. This is how much you have at retirement. And that's great. But what do you do when things don't go right in the moment, right? Like we just talked about, what does it feel like when the market tanks and you're looking at your portfolio down a huge amount? If you haven't planned for that, whether that's before retirement or even worse, after retirement, when that's your only source of income, if you haven't planned for what can go wrong, then those moments that are bad feel so much worse because they're sudden and you haven't planned for. But when you've planned for what can go wrong and then wrong happens, you've got a little bit more security there because one, you've got the tools in place, you've got the plan in place. And two, you have that emotional security of, I planned for this, I'm good. I already know that I set myself up to deal with this fine. So that's what we do, that some places don't, is talk about what can go wrong, because that's almost more important, is making sure that we talk about when things go wrong rather than just when things go right.
Amazing. Moving on to another question, and this is a very different topic, but I'm excited to have the dialogue with you. Is there a way to shift into a more sharing-based economy that serves all, that utilizes some of the efficient methods of traditional financial planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting topic. It's mostly stuff that's very macro and above my head, but I definitely think that there are a lot of lessons that can be taken from financial planning, right? One of those is the long-term investment horizon and not trying to beat and time things too much, right? So, it's interesting because there are concepts, these are concepts that are very individualized, right? Like we have talked about, there's no cookie cutter solution for most people, but taking the lessons of planning for what can go wrong, making sure people have that security in place could help, I think, bring about a more sharing-based economy, simply because when people have that risk covered, it allows them to do so much more on the investment and wealth building side, right? When one bad instance of bad luck, whatever it may be, comes their way, there are plenty of people that just don't have the income or don't have the wealth built up to recover from that. And that might set them back 10 years. They might never recover, right? And so I think that is an important aspect, is we need to make sure, if, in a more sharing-based economy, that people at least have that safety net, that there is no circumstance that's going to cause them to basically be behind for the rest of their lives, where they're never going to catch up. And so that's part of what we help with planning individually, but that's only for people that do work with a financial planner that have the time or the means to do so. So I think that's an important part of that for sure.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I love that answer. That plays into a lot of what we talk about, where it is without some security, it can be hard to engage. It can be hard to share what we have. It can be hard to even connect with other people.
Exactly. And I'll reference the book that I talked about earlier, The Psychology of Wealth. One of the topics that is briefly mentioned is that for wealth building, it's not so much about getting the best, highest return as much as possible, so much as consistently investing over time. And if you can do that, basically anyone can build wealth that has the ability to do that, though. That's the caveat, right? Is if you have enough to put away consistently, then you can get wealthy. Anyone can do it. But with the caveat that you have to have the means to do that. And not everyone has the means to be able to do that. And so that is kind of the key, is that building wealth can be done fairly easily and fairly consistently, but you have to have the means to be able to put something towards investment in wealth building. And if you don't do that, if you're constantly trapped in a cycle of just trying to make it to the next month, just trying to make it to the next paycheck, you're never going to be able to build wealth unless you get incredibly lucky. I mean, that's really how it is, right? Unless you get very lucky, there's no way to do it in those circumstances. And so that's kind of the important thing, is making sure people are taken care of, that they can build that wealth long term, so that people aren't left out of that, joy of being able to build some wealth for themselves that they can enjoy long term and do what they want to do with their lives.
Yeah. And is there, that brings up a question for me of, is there a level, at what financial level do you start working with people? Like, do people come to you do people come to you from places of, I really don't feel like I have anything to start investing, to start setting aside, or is it always that they're at least at a certain a certain threshold?
Yeah. So for me, I don't have any thresholds, and I don't charge to sit down with people either, because I feel like this should be accessible to more people. So I don't want people to be left out because they didn't have a certain income level, or they couldn't afford to pay whatever to sit and meet with me, because I feel so strongly about the impact that planning has. And so I have sat down with people that are doing very well for themselves, and I've sat down with people that are kind of on the edge of that cycle, where they're trying to figure out, how do I get ahead of this so I can start building wealth long term? And typically some of the things that I end up mentioning for those people are emergency savings are huge, because mostly what ends up keeping people down is maybe one big expense that they couldn't afford, that they end up putting on a credit card or taking out a loan. And that's enough of an expense that it just weighs down everything else they have. If they had a medical expense that was just, $10,000, and they couldn't pay that all back, and they put it on a credit card, and now that credit card's going back at 20% interest, I mean, that could be backbreaking, and so coming up with a plan to attack debt, to build up emergency savings, so that emergency savings, the purpose there is to create an emergency cushion, right? So that if we have a big expense, we just kind of let our cushion, right, kind of help the fall, and then we build the cushion back up, instead of, well, we had nothing, oh, huge expense, now I got to go finance it through a credit card, loans, whatever. So those are typically some advice I give there. But I have worked with people from all different, whether they're well off or they're just looking for, how do I set the foundation? How do I even start building wealth? I've had all those conversations and ones in between.
Amazing. That's so cool. I'm so glad that you're doing that and making it accessible to people.
Yeah.
And yeah, so on the emergency savings, is there where do you suggest that people put that money? Do you have any recommendations for how is there kind of a plan that you usually give for that?
Yeah, so typically the recommendation is you want to have 6 months of your living expenses in a very liquid, safe account. So typically what that ends up being is a savings account, right? So we're not earning a lot of money on that. I mean, because interest rates are so low, you're basically earning nothing in a banking account, but that money is accessible instantly. And we can pull from it whenever we need to, whenever we want to. And we know that money's never going to go backwards either, which we can't have happen with our emergency, right? So we want to have some account, usually a savings account, that's kind of earmarked as this is money I don't touch unless it is an emergency, a big expense, or I'm like, okay, I have to do it here. I have to take money out of this. And sometimes that account is even separate from other savings. You might just have an account that's just for that emergency bucket so that you're not trying to, you don't have the temptation, right, of like, well, I can just dip below a little bit and I'll put it back next, just put that in a different account, put your other stuff elsewhere. And so we try and say savings account because it doesn't go backwards, and it's super liquid. We can get to it instantly. And then typically at least 3 months, and if you can, 6 months of your living expenses, just because one, that can be great for if you're out of a job, maybe you're in between jobs. It can help for large expenses. If you are between jobs, it means that instead of maybe taking the first thing that comes your way, just because out of desperation, out of need, you know that you have the savings that maybe you can wait for something that maybe fits a little bit either to your income level or to what you want to be doing, or work that's maybe more impactful to you. You have that flexibility and that ability because of the savings and work that you've done. So the emergency savings is one of the key components that gets overlooked a lot of the times.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I feel like that's really helpful, helpful and specific information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so our last question from Lucy is, what is a good model for collective living, community living? And I know that this isn't your area of expertise or anything, but I'm so glad you're willing to talk about it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is, yeah, like I said, this is, mostly over my head stuff, but of course, things I've thought about just personally. I think one of the things to me that's different, it's not necessarily financial planning related to what I do, but I think one of the important things about, different collective living spaces to me is our city design and urban design. That's something that's been kind of a side kind of interest, I think, for me is city development, and just learning about it a little bit, paying attention to it. Where I am in Jacksonville here, Jacksonville is a great city, but one of the things that it really suffers from is being in a very kind of 1960s, 1950s suburban driven design, very car centered. And so there's the public transportation system is not where it could be. The city itself is not extremely walkable. And so I think that naturally that creates a certain equity barriers for a lot of people when you don't have cities that are easily transported across without a car. Of course, that's a whole other litany of issues that come with that too. But I think that contributes to communal and collective living spaces is how we design our living spaces. Are they designed to be more social, or are they designed to get us from our apartment or house to our car to wherever we're going and then back again, right? And so I think that's something that's missing in a lot of our living spaces is more social collective areas to have interaction that kind of, I think, foster not just the social interaction, but a greater sense of community that I think would filter through into more than just a feeling, but into how we treat people, how we legislate, how we just see life in general. So that's something that's kind of just been a side interest of mine that doesn't have anything to do with financial planning, but that I've always found interesting and kind of believed in.
I love that you have that interest. That is so cool. I hope you get to share that more and be even more involved with that, because I think I would love to see more of that in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I'm interested in exploring somewhere along the way in my life. We'll see where that takes me.
Yeah. And this is another big picture question, but just interested in your perspective on it. Thinking back to that there are a lot of people who are trying to get ahead of that cycle of just trying to make it to the next month. What would you take as an approach? Like if you could, what do you feel could help those people on kind of a collective level? Like what would, like, I know, how you would sit down with them, individually now.
Yeah.
But if you were to take a bigger picture approach, what do you think you would change or add?
Sure. I think one of the bigger things is kind of how we define our standard of living for, any sort of assistance for people who are in lower income ranges who are struggling to get out of that cycle, right? I think one of the strongest tools that maybe the government has is minimum wage control, right? And that can help set a certain standard of living. And obviously, there's a lot of questions that come along with it. I mean, I work with a lot of small business owners. I have my parents are small business owners, and I know how that can be tougher for them to bear because personnel is normally their biggest expense compared to larger corporations. So certainly there's considerations to keep in mind, but we have to do a better job of defining kind of what the minimum standard of living is in our country, right? I mean, obviously, the United States, wealthiest country in the world. I mean, that what we accept, right, as kind of the lowest standard of living, I think has long kind of been unanalyzed for a few decades now on what we accept as the lowest part of our standard of living. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is looking into things like minimum wage control. And there's all kinds of government things. I don't want to get too political, but looking at basically just, the standard of living. What do we allow our country to accept as people can live like this and we don't care about it? I think that's the biggest thing that needs to change, is we need to change our definition of what really is livable. Livable to me really isn't just living paycheck to paycheck, because you're never really getting anywhere. You always feel like you're behind. To me, the standard of living is you're taken care of. You're able to live in a somewhat comfortable state, and you're able to feel like you can put something away, or at least you have the capability to put something away for yourself long term. If you can't do that, then nobody will ever get anywhere. Nobody gets out of that cycle. So we need to redefine how we help people as getting them to that point where they are able to make it out of that cycle, instead of keeping it at a point where it's a toss-up whether or not they kind of get a little lucky and make their way out, or maybe some things don't go their way and they just get trapped.
Yeah, I love that. And I was going to say, feel free to get as political as you want, because I think that when we talk about all of this, it is a holistic. If we're going, holistic with the country, it involves government and the decisions we're making, and
Absolutely.
And I think that, in my mind, that also transcends the maybe the two-side political system.
Yeah.
But we have to start looking at those kind of solutions. So I love it when you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very correct. And, I think because of the amount of people I see, it's easy to see it, definitely both sides in certain arguments where, like I said, on the minimum wage argument, it's obviously it's really easy when you criticize like Amazon and Jeff Bezos is worth, hundreds of billions of dollars. Like that's not even a hard decision, right? Like, should that guy have that much wealth? Like, most people would be like, there's no way he needs all that, right? But, when you talk about small business owners, they're like, I mean, another $3 I have to pay everyone on my payroll, like, I'm out of business at that point. And so, that's where it's so tough, is like bridging that gap, because, the small business owners are almost in the same plane as the people who are trying to, get that minimum wage bump and bump their standard of living. A lot of those people are just living average lives too with their own business. And so we have to find a way to kind of change that wealth inequality and bring the money back down to more even. I mean, there are plenty of graphs out there if you look at how wealth inequality has grown, where you have the lowest income level to the highest, and you look over the past few decades, and it's, gone from, you would expect a curve to just like way down to just almost like a straight line up like this, right? And so I think that's something else we have to address is wealth inequality is a serious issue, and not necessarily even just morally, but even pragmatically, just looking at it economically, it's not something that's viable to put such a large percentage of a nation's wealth in so few people and reduce the buying power of a vast majority of the market. It's not only, whether it's a question morally, you can argue, but pragmatically, it's just not great economically.
I absolutely agree. And I would love, with minimum wage, I would love to see something related to scale of,
Yep.
of the business. I would love to see it where if you have a giant business, that there's, a higher minimum wage than a smaller business, because I do feel like it's important for, I feel like people can make those decisions of, okay, I want to work for a smaller business. I want to work, maybe for a startup or something. And I'm okay making less. So I would love to see something. I don't know how that can be implemented,
Absolutely.
but.
And I think something else you could do on the other side is maybe not even changing what the minimum wage is for a small company versus a medium company versus a large company, but maybe you provide some ways to help alleviate certain expenses for small businesses, to make it so that they can use that now to go pay their people more and take some other expenses kind of off their payroll. Maybe one of those expenses is, any sort of maybe small 401k or group plans. Maybe it's regardless. I mean, there's a vast amount of things that could go into it. But if there are a way to help maybe alleviate some of those expenses for small businesses and allow them the room to comfortably accommodate those minimum wage changes, that could be kind of on the other side of the equation that might help that as well.
I love that approach. I think that's great. And on, so, talking about this, have you, how do you feel about something like a basic income or a universal basic income? Do you feel like that would be, helpful in this direction, or just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a super interesting topic. Obviously, talking very personally here on, again, out of my professional realm, but I think that universal basic income, it's something that's very interesting. I would like to see, I think it could be very intriguing to see some certain level of it tested. Maybe not a full-scale concept yet, but see what the impacts could be. I've seen studies that show that it could have a very positive impact on the economy. And I think it's an interesting way of solving that wealth inequality dynamic that we talked about earlier, is kind of just having universal level of income that also ties into that standard of living that we talked about, right? Where it's like, this is the minimum, this is our standard of living, this is what we're going to give people at the very minimum. And you can fund that maybe by, taxing, wealthier corporations or individuals to help level out that wealth inequality curve and make it so that our lowest standard of living is not where it currently is, so that even those who are, maybe at the bottom of that wealth scale are still in a position to set themselves up to be well off later down the line. So I think universal basic income is a tool that, it's unproven right now, but it could be very useful. And I think it's something that absolutely should be explored in those two concepts of helping lower the wealth inequality and also raising our basic standard of living in the country.
Amazing. Thank you for your willingness to walk through all these concepts with me. I really love talking about it, and I know we've gone off track of the few questions I briefed you on. So thank you for your
I'm having a great time. Yeah.
Awesome. So at this point, Matt, is there anything else that you really want to share? And then as another question, how can people support you? How can people support you, or maybe follow what you do? Yeah, what do you want?
Absolutely. So I think, I don't know, I've shared a lot about our planning philosophies, tried to get some knowledge out there. If, people are interested in learning more about what we do or interested in concepts about financial planning, I'd love for people to be able to email me, if they have questions or if they'd like to talk to me, regardless of what it may be. And then also, I'm trying to get more active on social media, try and take financial concepts and start introducing them to social media and be more active there. So I'll probably, give you some of my socials, like my LinkedIn, my Facebook, stuff like that, so that people can follow what I'm doing and planning and hopefully gain some value there as well. So I can give you all that information so that you can post it. People have to remember it from the video. But yeah, just go ahead and follow me. As far as support, I'm just happy to be here and be helping out in any way that I can. And hopefully people gain some knowledge today that helps them out, or maybe they didn't know before, or at least found interesting. And yeah, I'd love for people to follow me on social, and of course, reach out if you have any more questions about financial planning, whether that's just a quick question or whether, you'd like to have a discussion.
I love it. Yes, we will stick all of those links, any information that Matt gives me in the description of the video, so you can find it easily. And Matt, if you have anything over time that you want me to add in there later on, just send it my way. I'm so grateful for this time with you. This is a real treat, and I hope people really enjoy it. I know I've really enjoyed the information I've learned, and my mind is opening with ideas. So I thank you, Matt. This is just so fun. Thank you for your, Matt just agreed to do this very, very spontaneously and effortlessly, and so I love that so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad fate brought us together at that Rotaract meeting, and that we're sitting here today. I've had a blast.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and the Creative Wealth Community Podcast. Thank you, Matt McMullen. We'll talk to you all later.